So the other day we were in the videos and we were talking about the electrophysiology of the heart, and we're going to go a little bit deeper in things that you need to know when you're looking at the EKG and you go to analyze it. But you got to know about these basic things that you're looking for in order to begin to find these spots. So that's what we're going to do with these guys. So I'm going to slide myself up here because most of the time I'm not, there we go. All right, so waves and measures, and let's talk about these guys real quick. So when we're looking at an electrocardiogram, it's important to understand the principle of it's looking from what to what. And so, again, in this particular thing, it's lead 2, and it's the normal pathway of the heart. So what we're seeing here is if what direction the millivolts is showing, the up or down, and what that means. The up means it's moving from the negative to the positive. If it's inverted, that means it's moving from the direction of the positive to the negative. No matter what lead that's in, by the way, whether it's V1 or lead 2, lead 1, lead 3, AVR, AVF, whatever that is the principle behind it. And it's kind of important to understand that as you get started in looking at EKGs, to see what direction that it's going. This is going to get extremely, extremely important when we get to 12 leads. So again, if it's flowing towards the positive electrode, it's going to be upright. Okay? If you're a positive person, you're upbeat. That's the way I remember it. And if you're a negative person, you're downbeat, right? So you're going down. So if you can remember those two little principles, you're good. So electrode monitoring, again, most of the time we monitor in lead 2, which is on the right arm is where your negative is, and down on your left leg is going to be the positive. So, and again, and it's important to understand this part specifically, and the reason that we monitor in lead 2 most of the time, and as we draw the line here, it usually goes, again, this is the normal physiologic axis of the heart. If you look at it, we draw that line of the heart, more than likely it's almost exactly like that. So that's why we like to use lead 2 to determine dysrhythmias, okay? So that if we can find something that's wrong, okay? So again, it kind of depends on what you're looking at as to what lead you want to use. But as we learn these things, it's going to be lead 2, and that's the very thing that you really got to understand. All right, graph paper. By the way, we talked about this a little bit in class, but I want to stress this 4, 5. I got to put a little marks on here. 4, 5. I got to put a little mark right there. Well, and this is the way that it's supposed to be. I probably mismeasured it. 3, 4, 5. No, I didn't. Okay, that's right. So long and short, for every 5 boxes, that's 1 second. Okay. And for all 3 of these boxes, and by the way, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, actually that little line's supposed to be right there. That's another 5 seconds. So if we go all the way over here, this is actually a 3-second strip. Okay? Now, again, this is sample graph paper. If you look at the modern graph paper, by the way, most of it has these little ticks on it already. So again, and what we're looking at is, again, the little boxes is the example is 1 little box, and then again 1 big box, okay? So 1 little box is 0.04 seconds, and 1 big box is 0.2 seconds, okay? And so these are very important because we're talking about timing, and timing is going to make everything for our rules for defining what a rhythm is or is not. It has a lot to do with that. So again, voltage is compared to the horizontal spikes. It's the up and down. Remember, you usually have an isoelectric line, and then again, it's going to go up. It's going to go down depending on which way the electricity was flowing. Okay? And the flip of that is your little boxes here. We already talked about this, the time measurements. And let's move on to what the waves are. So again, the standard the standard waveforms, if you're looking at a sinus rhythm, the waves that you're going to see, P wave, QRS, T wave, okay? So this guy right here, and there should be a pulse with the QRS complex. That should be, and I stress that should be. All right, so our PR. So these are all the different waves, by the way. So the P wave, and I'm going to use this particular slide to explain that. P wave, again, is your atria depolarizing. All right. So if I can get my pen to work here, atria. That's your atria depolarizing. Your QRS is your ventricle depolarizing. And then down here, the T wave is your ventricle repolarizing. Okay? So, why is this kind of important? But there's some other things in there that are kind of important that we really need to know about. So there's some two segments that are for sure kind of important here. Now the PR segment, I can tell you, we usually don't use that one because we're usually using this guy down here, which is our PR interval. And that one's pretty important. So you're going from the start of the P wave to the start of the Q wave or the R wave, whichever comes first in the QRS complex. Okay? And by the way, this is going to be, the standard is 0.12 to 0.20. And as we all know by counting boxes, that's going to be 3 little boxes, and that's going to be 5 little boxes. Okay? The QRS complex, let me draw a little arrow up here. So the QRS complex, from the start of wherever the Q wave is until the S wave ends, and that guy right there, he's going to be 0.08 to, well, that's a horrible 8, to 0.12. Another way to put that is 2 to 3 little boxes. Okay? Now, one other thing about this guy right here is the QRS. When the S ends and the T wave segment and the ST segment begins, this particular spot here, this little spot right here, and we also call that the J point. That's going to become a little bit more important as we start going into diagnosing a patient. But you need to know where that spot is. Okay? Real quick on the QRS complex. I'm going to erase all the, let's see here. Let me erase all the ink on the slide because there's one other part that we got to talk about with the QRS. The Q wave is always your first negative deflection. Okay? Q wave is the first negative deflection. Okay? R wave is going to be when it goes above the isoelectric line. And by the way, for this particular one, your isoelectric line, of course I can't draw that well, but there is your isoelectric line. So when it shoots up, that's going to be the first upward deflection above the isoelectric line. So technically this is still an R wave until it gets to right about here. When it gets to here, it then becomes the S wave. So the S wave is going to be when the R wave or even a Q wave, it's the first, again, it's the deflection back up to the isoelectric line, and it's only if it goes negative, okay? So only if it goes negative do we call it an S wave, all right? So just make sure that we understand that. Is if it goes below that isoelectric line and then it returns, that is what makes it the S wave. Okay. Now, the reason I bring up all that lovely stuff, let me erase all my ink here, is for this next slide. So you can have different shapes. Again, most of the time, everything being normal, QRS, all right? But you can't have it just Q, then R, and it doesn't, see how it doesn't go below, so therefore there's not an S. This guy doesn't even have a Q wave. He's got an R and an S. This guy here goes down, but it never goes back above the isoelectric line, the QS complex. R wave, this guy just simply, it went up and then goes back down to the baseline. Again, QR, and the problem with this guy is it turned negative, but it shot back up. And actually, we call that a R prime. We usually mark it R with a sub 1 there. So this is another example of, so this would be QRS R prime wave. Okay? Now, again, most people, we don't say it like that. And we just say that it's got a notch to it is what we normally say, or we say it has an R prime wave. So that's probably the more technical way. R prime does not have to be after your S. It can be, it doesn't have to be. Okay? So QR, R prime, S. All right? So these are the examples of how that would work. And understand that, again, it's going to be a little confusing until you start using it. Once you start using it, then you're going to go, oh, okay, this is what that is. Pretty much, by the way, if you've got the notches there, I can guarantee you they're not going to be a normal QRS complex. Most of the time, they're going to be wider than 0.12. All right, usually it's indicative of some sort of previous heart damage that has gone on. Now, again, if you look at this one, you say, well, wait a minute, I got, all kinds of P waves. Well, I don't have all kinds of P waves. This is the person moving, because if I look at this part right here, and if I look at this part right here, that actually looks, well, except for this little spot right here, this looks pretty good. So what this is the patient is actually having a little bit of muscle tremor. Nothing to be ashamed of. It happens. And then you got the patient just moves. Yeah, I can't see nothing. Again, you got to tell them to stop moving. All right. Sometimes we get that luxury. Sometimes we don't. But again, this segment here, you focus on the stuff that's normal. And the stuff that's normal is this area, well, sort of, kind of. This is guys moving still. I would probably try to get a better tracing. Yeah, I got a loose electrode here. I'm getting all kinds of, I can't tell jack from that. I know that I got some QRS complexes in there. Yeah, I can tell you I got a QRS complex here, but really this isn't telling me much. And I need to probably fix my problem with the loose electrodes. All right, 60 cycle interference. Remember when a fan moves the motors, it oscillates. So that oscillation kind of looks like this. Okay. Now the problem is I can still see complexes here, but the little finite things I can't see, which makes it difficult. But I will tell you that most modern machines today, guys, used to be when you walked in with a LifePak 5 and there was a fan running, forget it. You didn't get anything. You got all kinds of 60 cycle interference. Nowadays, the electronics are pretty good about filtering that stuff out. So it gives you a clearer EKG tracing. All right, so let's talk about the T-wave real quick, and my favorite analogy, which of course is the toilet bowl. This is the absolute refractory period. Long and short, your heart cannot, it physiologically cannot beat during this time. Think of it as you have just flushed the toilet. If you have just flushed the toilet, if you try to flush it again, you can't flush it. Nothing's going to happen. Okay? And that's okay because actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. Where it becomes bad is when we go to this guy. So this is the relative refractory period. Now during this time, think of it as the toilet bowl has actually filled up, but only like maybe halfway. It's not at full strength. So can you flush the toilet at this point? Yes, you can. Now, will it be an effective flush? No, it will not be. Matter of fact, this is kind of what we call the danger area, okay? This is danger, Will Robinson, danger. If I've got beats coming into this area, okay, for whatever reason, if I have something fire off here, okay, the problem with that is, the big problem with that is that I can have the patient actually go into VFib, or worse yet, they can probably go into VTAC. By the way, both of these bad, and we don't want those. All right. So again, if I've got anything that's hitting on here, this is called the R on T phenomenon, and that is something you need to not only pay very close attention to, but you need to probably correct whatever it is that's causing that. And we're going to talk about correcting it in a later episode of this. All right. So where are we at here? Oh, practice strips. No, I'm going to let you guys do that on your own. Remember that all of these slides are online. And again, the best way to practice is to look at them. I'm not going to sit there and hound you, but what I will be doing is putting them up in class. So you got to be ready for it, and you got to understand what's going on. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next video.